From Manila to the globe, this is World Newsfeed, bringing you the biggest stories shaping our times. Good morning, I'm Raine Musñgi. Let's dive into the headlines making a global impact. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Tuesday evening he was ready to implement a ceasefire deal with Lebanon. He noted that Israel would respond forcefully to any violation by Hezbollah, declaring Israel would retain complete military freedom of action. Israel and Lebanese armed group Hezbollah are set to implement a ceasefire on Wednesday as part of a U.S. proposed deal for a 60-day truce to end more than a year of hostilities. In a television address, Netanyahu said he would put the ceasefire accord to his full cabinet later in the evening. Israeli TV reported that the more restricted security cabinet had earlier approved the deal. The Lebanon ceasefire agreement requires Israeli troops to withdraw from South Lebanon and Lebanon's army to deploy in the region. Officials say Hezbollah would end its armed presence along the border south of the Litani River. Netanyahu added that there were 3 reasons to pursue a ceasefire: to focus on Iran, replenish depleted arms supplies, and give the army a rest, and finally, to isolate Hamas, the militant group that triggered war in the region when it launched an attack on Israel from Gaza last year.
This evening, I will bring a ceasefire outline for the cabinet's approval. The length of the ceasefire depends on what happens in Lebanon. In full cooperation with the United States, we retain complete military freedom of action. Should Hezbollah violate the agreement or attempt to rearm, we will strike. We will respond forcefully to any violation. A good deal is a deal that is enforced, and we will enforce it. With God's help, we will establish security. We will rehabilitate the North and continue united until victory.
The accord clears the way for an end to a conflict that has killed thousands of people since it was ignited by the Gaza war last year. But there was no indication that a truce in Lebanon would hasten a ceasefire and hostage release deal in devastated Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he hoped the ceasefire deal between Israel and Lebanon would make a big difference for both countries. He enumerated the terms of the ceasefire, saying he hopes it would allow people to return home.
This has been an intensive diplomatic effort by the United States, partners like France, working with Israel, working with Lebanon over many months. And if we get to the conclusion that I hope we reach very soon, it will make a big difference. It will make a big difference in saving lives and livelihoods in Lebanon and in Israel. It will make a big difference in creating the conditions that will allow people to return to their homes safely in northern Israel and in southern Lebanon. And I also believe that by de-escalating tensions in the region, it can also help us to end the conflict in Gaza. In particular, Hamas will know that it can't count on other fronts opening up in the war. So, we're tracking this very closely, and I hope and believe that we can get this over the finish line. Now, what we've worked on for many months now was getting an agreement between Israel and Lebanon on the effective implementation of 1701 that would result in the withdrawal of any Israeli forces in Lebanon, the withdrawal of Hezbollah to the north such that it couldn't threaten Israel, the deployment of the Lebanese armed forces, so critical to the security of the state, to southern Lebanon, as well as UNIFIL, and an oversight mechanism to make sure that the agreements were, any agreements are being carried out and fulfilled. So, if this is finally agreed, and if this goes forward, it is the answer to the problem that has bedeviled the area for a couple of decades, and is the best way to guarantee that there is peace, there is stability, and this constant threat of attack from Hezbollah, which has caused people to leave their homes, kids to not be able to go to school, is over. People can return, just as people who've been displaced in southern Lebanon can return to their homes.
French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot said France and the United States had worked relentlessly to help achieve the ceasefire deal.
What I can confirm is that France and the United States, who, for different but just as legitimate reasons, are very attached to the idea of peace returning to Lebanon, and particularly to southern Lebanon, started to work actively more than a year ago, and have sped up those efforts from the end of September to obtain a ceasefire and create the conditions for peace and security in southern Lebanon.
Even amid ceasefire talks, Israel launched a series of airstrikes targeting central Beirut and the city's southern suburbs on Tuesday afternoon. Lebanon's official national news agency reported 7 people were killed and 37 injured after a building housing displaced people in Al-Nuwairi, a densely populated area in central Beirut, was hit by Israeli airstrikes. The southern suburbs of Beirut were hit by 2 airstrikes minutes after the Israeli Defense Forces announced that they had launched large-scale airstrikes in Beirut, attacking 20 Hezbollah targets in the southern suburbs. The UN rights chief voiced concern about the escalation of hostilities in Lebanon, where his office said nearly 100 people have reported killed by Israeli airstrikes in recent days, including women, children, and medics.
The Lebanese armed group, Hezbollah, has also continued to fire rockets on the north of Israel, which has resulted in civilian casualties. Most of these rockets are indiscriminate by nature, prolonging the displacement of many Israeli civilians, which is unacceptable.
Well, not everyone was happy about the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Displaced people from northern Israel and their supporters protested in Tel Aviv against the truce. Here's what they had to say.
I came from Nahariya to protest because they are selling us. This is what we feel this agreement is. They put the French, who were not able to protect the Christian Lebanese in Lebanon or their own country from the radical Islamists, in charge of us, and 10,000 Lebanese soldiers after the Lebanese Prime Minister said he backs Hezbollah. We won't have it. Nahariya is not something you can sell cheaply. We've been eating a lot of fire recently, a lot of sacrifices. Many soldiers died trying to protect our lives, and it would all have been in vain if this agreement goes forward.
We think the agreement is dangerous for generations. The people, we expect from the government that the people of South Lebanon won't come back home because they terrorists or support terrorists. We expect that IDF will stay at south of Lebanon to secure our safety and our lives. We expect from our government to ensure that Hezbollah will be destroyed and eliminated. They can't launch missiles on us at all.
Well, Hezbollah will remain active after its war with Israel ends, including by helping displaced Lebanese return to their villages and rebuilding areas destroyed by Israeli strikes. Senior Hezbollah official and member of parliament Hassan Fadlallah said on Tuesday Lebanon was facing dangerous and sensitive hours before the anticipated announcement of the ceasefire, given the Israeli Air Force's intensified attacks still on Tuesday afternoon in Beirut and southern suburbs. He added that Hezbollah's social, health, and development branches are at the highest level of preparedness for the day following a ceasefire announcement.
I can say that today, in all confidence, if the Israeli aggression stops, then the goals that Israel drew have not been achieved. It announced that it wants to destroy Hezbollah, crush Hezbollah, that it wants to take control of the area south of the Litani River through any means. It was not able to reach the Litani River. It was not able to remain in any village of the villages. The resistance fighters remain on the border. Lebanon does not consider itself concerned with any side agreements that the Israeli entity has concluded with the United States. The two of them were one side in this war. What is being said about a letter of guarantees or something like it does not concern Lebanon. We are concerned with the measures that the Lebanese state institutions will take on Lebanese territory, as we have set two main points: a halt to the aggression and the protection of Lebanese sovereignty. From now, we confirm that the Hezbollah resistance will remain, will continue, will carry on, and it is a part of the national formula known as the army, the people, and the resistance.
Foreign ministers from leading industrialized countries threw their support, or strong support Tuesday, behind an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, but sidestepped the question of whether to enforce an international arrest warrant for Israel's leader over the war in Gaza. In their final communique, the group of 7 ministers demanded Israel facilitate full, rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian assistance in all its forms to Palestinians in Gaza, warning that its year-long assault had led to unprecedented food insecurity. But they didn't refer explicitly to the Hague-based ICC and its arrest warrants on the charges of crimes against humanity for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister Yoav Gallant. Warrants said there was reason to believe Netanyahu and Gallant have used starvation as a method of warfare by restricting humanitarian aid and have intentionally targeted Palestinian civilians in Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza, charges that Israeli officials deny. More news from around the world in a minute. The World Newsfeed will be right back. Stay with us.
Ganda.
Bilyonaryo.
Exactly.
You look like a billionaire tonight.
The bigger the hair, the closer to God.
Bilyonaryo. Super B. Yes.
Super B.
This is Tessa Prieto, and this is Bilyonaryo channel.
Hi, this is Sam Pinto.
And Anthony Semrad.
Hi, this is Donnie.
This is Belle.
And you are watching Bilyonaryo News Channel.
This is Nicole Anderson. Hi, this is Chief. Hey guys, this is Kylie Brazosa.
Hi, this is Mon Gutierrez, and you're watching Bilyonaryo News Channel, always on top.
Kunyari lang I'm a billionaire, but hello to all the viewers of Bilyonaryo.
Ito po si Father Nono.
Ako po si Father Fiel Pareha.
Ako si Risa Singson Kaupeng.
Kape at pandasal na po tayo. Ito po si Cardinal Chito Tagle.
Welcome back to World Newsfeed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also pledged to return all citizens from northern Israel back to their homes after more than a year of displacement, as Israel's security cabinet approved a ceasefire deal with Lebanon. Netanyahu also vowed to return 101 hostages held captive in Gaza. However, there was no indication that a truce in Lebanon would hasten a ceasefire and hostage release deal in devastated Gaza, where Israel is battling Palestinian militant group Hamas.
Citizens of Israel, I promised you victory, and we will achieve victory. We will complete the elimination of Hamas. We will return all our hostages. We will ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel, and we will return the residents of the North safely to their homes. The war will not end until we achieve all of its goals, including until we return the residents of the North safely home.
The prospect of a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah without a similar deal with Hamas in Gaza has left Palestinians feeling abandoned.
We would like the war to end just like in Lebanon, because the war started together here and in Lebanon. All focus is on Lebanon, the ceasefire in Lebanon, and they have forgotten us. Just like them, we would like to live. We wish to live a decent life. We don't ask for more. Stop the war, and that's it. This is the least we ask for. We want nothing more.
A growing number of European financial institutions have a business relationship with companies with ties to Israeli settlements. The Don't Buy Into Occupation Coalition report said a total of 822 financial institutions this year have relationships with 58 firms actively involved in Israeli settlements versus 776 last year. They called for heightened security, or rather scrutiny, if necessary, for divestments. Israeli settlement activity has expanded by a record amount, and some settlers hope U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will help them fulfill a dream of imposing sovereignty over the areas seen by Palestinians as the heart of a future state. Rising settler violence has led to U.S. sanctions, and some companies have said they would stop business in the occupied West Bank. NATO members on Tuesday reaffirmed their support for Ukraine, this time during talks with the country's officials held in response to Russia's launch of an experimental intermediate-range ballistic missile last week. Kyiv called a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council a forum for cooperation and briefed ambassadors representing NATO's 32 member countries. In a statement, Ukraine's ambassador to NATO said the attack was a blatant demonstration of force by Russia and a fruitless attempt to intimidate the allies. Britain sanctioned 30 ships in Russia's so-called shadow fleet that have been skirting restrictions to transport billions of dollars of petroleum. It is the biggest sanctions package targeting the fleet of illegitimate ships operating illegally to avoid sanctions. The Foreign Office said Monday the United Kingdom has now sanctioned 73 tankers, the most of any nation, in efforts to cripple a major funding source for Moscow's war against Ukraine.
We are shadowing 30 Russian vessels. We are determined to ensure that both the ships, the enablers of those ships thwarting European and UK sanctions are hurt at this time, and that we ensure that the attempts to circumvent the sanctions that we put in place previously, and of course to avoid Russia using its oil revenues to continue to fund its war, that we bear down on those issues.
Half the ship's sanction delivered more than $4.3 billion worth of oil and oil products in the past 12 months. 2 insurers were sanctioned for enabling the fleet. Russia said it was expelling a British diplomat on Tuesday for alleged spying in the latest blow to the already dire state of relations between the two countries. The FSB Security Service said the diplomat was conducting intelligence and subversive work that threatens the security of the Russian Federation. It named him as Edward Wilkes and said he was a second secretary, a relatively junior diplomatic rank. According to the FSB, the British diplomat was a replacement for one of 6 British diplomats expelled earlier this year, also on espionage charges. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel describes her dealings with world leaders like Russian President Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump during her 16 years in power in her new memoir, which comes as her legacy is under fire in light of today's crises. Merkel's memoir, entitled Freedom, Memories 1954 to 2021, was released simultaneously in 30 countries on Tuesday. In excerpts released ahead of the book's publication, Merkel justifies her decision to push back against offering Ukraine future membership of NATO at the Defense Alliance's 2008 summit in Bucharest, which her critics say may have dissuaded Russia from invading Ukraine. During her 4 consecutive terms in office, Merkel steered Germany and Europe through the global financial crisis, the Eurozone debt crisis, and the COVID-19 pandemic. But she has since faced criticism for allowing Germany to become ever more dependent on cheap Russian gas and Chinese trade, even following Russia's forcible annexation of Crimea and industry warnings against over-reliance on China. Critics also blame the rise of the far-right and high energy costs in part to her decisions to open Germany's borders to refugees and to phase out nuclear power.
I was actually most curious as to whether the book was a kind of self-defense pamphlet or whether she would reveal certain dirty little secrets about her work and her collaboration with other politicians. But it turned out exactly as I expected. It's partly an explanatory book, especially about how she acted in the major crises. And she says, right at the beginning of the book, that this was also her motive, that during the refugee crisis, she felt that she couldn't leave it to others, or only others to interpret what she had done. That was the impulse for her to write a memoir, even though she hadn't actually intended to do so.
Merkel will also launch the book in the United States a week later at a Washington event with former President Barack Obama, with whom she forged a close political relationship. Still ahead, an F1 racer turns into an astronaut. World Newsfeed will be right back. Stay on BNC.
Ciao, mabuhay. You are watching The Word Exposed.
Prepare our hearts as we dive deeper into our faith and receive the strength from God's Word. Join Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle as he shares the reflection we need for the rest of the week.
We pray that the Word of God would find fulfillment in your life and His blessings be always upon you.
Every Sunday, 7 a.m. with replays at 3 p.m.
This is The Scorecard, where you score the latest sports news and in-depth views. I'm Anton Rojas.
Get ready, be prepared, get to the latest stories, updates, and reports about what's happening in the world of sports. Hosted by Anton Rojas.
The Scorecard, where sports is our business and business is our sport, right here.
The Scorecard on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Ginalaw po kasi yung CCTV. Do you do that in PAO? The upper chamber was invaded.
You're putting me in a difficult spot. Well, I disagree with that. Hindi kami natutuwa sa
But
ganun.
baka fake news.
Laking problema nun.
Naging klaro ho ba sa inyo? May Davao Death Squad o wala?
There was an admission. Sinabi na niya yun.
They went there with one mission.
To kill.
We ask the questions, we tackle the issues, we clarify matters, and we get on point.
At BNC, 12 noon doesn't mean break. But breaking news, biggest stories, and latest updates.
The International Monetary Fund urges countries to implement fiscal tightening policy. Authorities raided a Pogo hub just hundreds of meters away from the Senate building.
Mai Rodriguez, Newsfeed at noon on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Welcome back to World Newsfeed. President-elect Donald Trump on Monday pledged big tariffs on the United States' three largest trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China, and detailed how he will implement campaign promises that could trigger trade wars. Trump, who takes office on January 20th, said he would impose a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico until they clamp down on drugs, particularly fentanyl, and migrants crossing the border, in a move that would appear to violate a free trade deal. Trump separately outlined an additional 10% tariff above any additional tariffs on imports from China. It was not entirely clear what this would mean for China, as he has previously pledged to end China's most favored nation trading status and slap tariffs on Chinese imports in excess of 60%, much higher than those imposed during his first term. China called the tariffs irresponsible and warns that no one will win a trade war. Mexico's president says tariffs will not solve the U.S.'s drug problem, while Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who spoke to Trump the night before, had called a meeting with his country's premiers after they warned a 25% tariff would be devastating for workers.
I had a good call with Donald Trump last night again. We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our two countries flow back and forth. We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call. This is something that we can do, laying out the facts, moving forward in constructive ways. This is a relationship that we know takes a certain amount of working on, and that's what we'll do.
Our letter for President-elect Donald Trump responds to these two issues that he is raising and says we will continue collaborating. Now, if even after that there are tariffs, what we are saying is that it is going to affect the U.S. economy and U.S. companies that have been here in Mexico for 80 years. So it is better that we have a dialogue and come to an agreement on all these issues and others that are relevant, and we have a plan anyway.
On to Asia now. Pakistan security forces launched a sweeping midnight raid on Wednesday on supporters of jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Local media said Khan supporters had earlier stormed the capital, demanding his release, with hundreds arrested amid chaotic scenes. Khan's party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, or PTI, said they plan on staging a sit-in in the red zone until the release of Khan, who has been in jail since August last year. Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi ruled out any negotiations with the protesters that he said had used weapons against security forces and were heavily armed and had broken a ban on gatherings in the city. Rescue workers in Indonesia are using heavy equipment to search for victims of recent flooding and landslides that have claimed at least 20 lives. That's according to the National Disaster Agency. Heavy rain began on Saturday, causing deadly floods and landslides across 4 districts in northern Sumatra. In North Sumatra, 5 bodies of missing individuals were found under mud and debris, while a total of 10 fatalities have been reported in Karo district due to the landslides. In Deli Serdang district, 4 bodies have been found with 2 individuals still missing. Communication has been difficult due to power outages and lack of cell phone reception, complicating rescue efforts. Following further searches, the death toll was revised to 20, with significant casualties reported in South Tapanuli, Padang Lawas, and Deli Serdang. The search for survivors resumed Monday after operations had been halted due to weather. On the lighter side, Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton recently fulfilled a childhood dream when he went on an astronaut training flight in Texas. The 39-year-old 7-time F1 world champion has always dreamed of being in space, and he took a large step towards that goal when he took to the air in an L-39 Albatross jet used in astronaut training sessions. Wearing a unique race suit featuring a dedicated space mission patch with his starting number 44, the Mercedes driver was allowed to take control of the aircraft for part of the flight. Drawing a comparison between flying and the plane and driving an F1 car, Hamilton observed that it is very different to Formula One.
The G-force is so much different to Formula One. I mean, in Formula One, we don't get fast enough to ever pass out. The blood's never leaving your head. So you get a little bit of vertical G going for like Eau Rouge, for example, but maybe half to maybe one G or something like that. As we're on here, when you bank and turn, you really feel like the blood leaving your body. So chest gets very heavy, and it's very hard to breathe in that moment, and very hard to like stay. You have to keep your body tight and just your legs tight, and just to keep yourself awake.
Hamilton was put through the same training used to prepare the Inspiration 4 and Polaris Dawn crews for commercial space flight missions, practicing accelerations and decelerations to experience lateral G-forces. He experienced a zero-G demonstration, during which he briefly experienced a feeling of weightlessness and also pulled a maximum of 7.5 G, which is more than astronauts typically experience on ascent. In entertainment now, folks, have your popcorns ready because the feud between hip-hop superstars Kendrick Lamar and Drake takes a serious turn. The Associated Press reports the Canadian rapper filed legal action in New York Monday. He accused Universal Music Group, or UMG, of falsely pumping up the popularity of Lamar's track Not Like Us on Spotify and other streaming platforms. In response, UMG calls Drake's allegation, quote, offensive and untrue. K-Dot's Not Like Us became an instant hit back in May, where he viciously attacked Drake in his bitter feud that keeps on giving. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Catch up with us again tomorrow at 10 when we bring you the world in 30 minutes, only on World Newsfeed. Follow the Money comes next. Keep it here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel, always on top.